Today we're going to talk about the Special Operations Manual for Majestic-12. Now, in 1984, some UFO researchers had received in the mail anonymously a roll of film that had pictures of documents on it. Basically, it was a document that was a briefing document for President-elect Dwight Eisenhower for a briefing that was going to occur in 1952 on the subject of crashed flying saucers, aliens, recovered alien bodies, recovered alien spacecraft. And I talked about this in a previous podcast. I will leave a link for that podcast in the description, along with the link for the video of that podcast. But I'm not going to get into that right now because we're going to talk about this other document that was leaked 10 years after those documents. In December of 1994, UFO researcher Don Berliner received in the mail a manila envelope from Wisconsin. And inside that envelope was a roll of 35 millimeter film. Now, when Berliner first received this, he thought that it was a roll of pictures that he had taken and left behind. He had just been in Wisconsin, and he was there for an experimental aircraft show, and he thought that that's what it was. But when he had it developed, he realized that it wasn't anything to do with the pictures, any pictures that he had taken. It was actually pictures of a top-secret report. And the report was entitled Majestic-12 Group Special Operations Manual, Extraterrestrial Entities and Technology Recovery and Disposal. Now, you can read about all this in the late Stanton Friedman's book, Top-Secret Magic, Operation Majestic-12 and the United States Government's UFO Cover-Up. It's a very interesting book, and there's a full chapter devoted just to this operations manual. And but since this manual came out, there were a lot of researchers that looked into this, and particularly Dr. Robert Wood and his son Ryan Wood, and they researched this for the years and years after Berliner received this roll of film, and they came to the conclusion that they were real. Now, I'm not going to talk about the reasons why they're real here. That's one of the problems with ufology. Like we get bogged down in trying to prove the reality of something. These guys already did that. I'm not here to do that. I'm not here to relitigate it all over again. But I will leave a link for a website. These guys actually had a book. Well, it's out of print now, unfortunately. They actually had not only that, on their website, they also had a replica of this document put together. And I'll get into that in a little bit more here. The book, though, that they wrote it's out of print now, that Ryan Wood had written. It's Magic Eyes Only. It's a 300-some page book, and it's going for over $200 right now on Amazon. I don't have a copy of that book. I wish I did. I will leave a link for their. They do have a website where they go over everything, the reasoning on why this document, why they believe this operations manual is real. They pretty much already proved that years and years ago. Okay, that's a done deal. There's nothing that a debunker could really say that could, because they had an answer for everything. These documents. In fact, if somebody were to try to fake something like this, it would have cost hundreds of thousands of dollars, and who has the money to do something like that? But anyhow, the operations manual itself was dated April 1954. So this was. And the images themselves that were on the film was actually somebody holding, taking a picture of each page in a binder. These documents were part of a binder, and you could see a part, somebody's thumb holding it. Whether the pictures were taken in the 50s or later on in the 80s, you would have to assume that if this document was for 1954, I'm sure over the decades it was probably updated numerous times. So by the time 1994 rolled around and Don Berliner received this in the mail, by that point I'm sure there was multiple revisions. But this version here that he received was the one from 1954. And whoever sent these documents, they took a picture. You could see, you could see a hand holding a booklet in some sort of a binder, and obviously this person would turn a page and then take another picture, holding the page open. And these guys, the Wood and his Robert Wood and Ryan Wood, they did a lot of research on this. Everything, conforms to what a document from 1954 prepared by people in the Pentagon would have looked like. I mean, again, I'm not going to get into that. But anyway, the document was on every page. When you would turn the document on the page on the left, on the back page of each document, there was a warning that this stuff is top secret. It's each page it had a big warning. It says top secret, magic eyes only. Warning. This is a top secret, magic eyes only document containing compartmentalized information essential to the national security of the United States. Eyes only access to the material herein is strictly limited to personnel possessing Magic 12 clearance level. Examination or use by unauthorized personnel is strictly forbidden and is punishable by federal law. Now, and then the next, once you get into this document, there was a table of contents. It had, Chapter 1, Operation Majestic-12, and as a subtopic in that Chapter 1, Section 1, Project Purpose and Goals. Chapter 2, Introduction. Sections 1, General. Section 2, Definition and Data. Chapter 3, Recovery Operations, and so on and so forth. Chapter 5, Extraterrestrial biological entities, and it talks about the entities themselves. There's a lot of... Again, I highly recommend, because unfortunately, Wood's book is no longer available unless you want to pay $200 and some for it on Amazon or eBay. But you could read more about this in Friedman's book, Top Secret Magic. I will leave a link for that in the description as well. Anyhow, let's get into this. Okay, we're going to look at Chapter 1, Operation Majestic-12, and we're just going to go through some of these paragraphs and just, this is extremely interesting stuff. And, we need to talk about this because, again, it's been years and years now since this came out. It's almost 30 years now this document was leaked. And you really haven't heard much about it in the past few years, and a lot of people haven't been talking about it. But I think it's definitely worthy of talking about now, especially considering the Pentagon's starting to come clean about some of this stuff, right? So I think this this makes sense. I mean, when you go through this document, this Special Operations Manual, it basically this all okay. If this is how if there was a recovery operation to recover crashed flying saucers and alien bodies and live aliens, well, this everything you read here seems like okay, that this makes sense. It also talks about how they would lie to the press. It talks about how to do that. I mean, there's all these different things here, and it all makes sense. And this is what you would do. So this document is real. Again, if you want to find out the reasons why it's real, again, I highly recommend you click on the link of the website for the Woods that the Woods have, and they go through all the reasoning why this thing is real. Anyway, let's look at this. We're not going to read the whole thing, but we're going to go through some of the highlights here. Okay, now in Chapter 1, in Section 1, Project Purpose and Goals, Scope. This manual has been prepared especially for Majestic-12 units. Its purpose is to present all aspects of Majestic-12 so authorized personnel will have a better understanding of the goals of the group, be able to more expertly deal with unidentified flying objects, extraterrestrial technologies, and entities, and increase the efficiency of future operations. General, this is part 2 here. General, MJ-12 takes this subject of the UFOBs. They used to call them, back then, that was the term for them at that time. It wasn't just UFOs, it was UFOBs. As we know now, it's UAP. They keep changing this over the years. But in 1954, when this thing was prepared, UFOs weren't just UFOs, they were UFOBs. There was an extra letter thrown in there for some reason. MJ-12 takes the subject of the UFOBs, extraterrestrial technology, and extraterrestrial biological entities very seriously and considers the entire subject to be a matter of the very highest national security. For that reason, everything relating to the subject has been assigned the very highest security classification. 3 main points will be covered in this section. A, the general aspects of MJ-12 to clear up any misconceptions that anyone may have. B, the importance of the operation. And C, the need for absolute secrecy in all phases of the operation. And then it talks about security classification. All information relating to MJ-12 has been classified magic eyes only and carries a security level 2 points above that of top secret. The reason for this has to do with the consequences that may arise not only from the impact upon the public should the existence of such matters become general knowledge, but also the danger of having such advanced technology as has been recovered by the Air Force fall into the hands of unfriendly foreign powers. No information is released to the public press, and the official government position is that no special group such as MJ-12 exists. Then it goes on to the history of the group. Operation Majestic-12 was established by special classified presidential order on 24 September 1947 at the recommendation of Secretary of Defense James V. Forrestal and Dr. Vannevar Bush, chairman of the Joint Research and Development Board. Operations are carried out under a top-secret research and development intelligence group directly responsible only to the President of the United States. The goals of the MJ-12 group are as follows. A, the recovery for scientific study of all materials and devices of a foreign or extraterrestrial manufacture that may become available. Such material and devices will be recovered by any and all means deemed necessary by the group. B, the recovery for scientific study of all entities and remains of entities not of terrestrial origin, which may become available through independent action by those entities or by misfortune or military action. C, the establishment and administration of special teams to accomplish the above operations. D, the establishment and administration of special secure facilities located at secret locations within the continental borders of the United States for the receiving, processing, analysis, and scientific study of any and all materials and entities classified as being of extraterrestrial origin by the group of the special teams. E, establishment and administration of covert operation to be carried out in concert with Central Intelligence to effect the recovery for the United States of extraterrestrial technology and entities which may come down inside the territory or fall into the possession of foreign powers. F, the establishment and maintenance of absolute top secrecy concerning all the above operations. Then it talks about the current situation, and this would be the current situation as of 1954. Again, I believe that this most certainly has been updated numerous times over the decades. But anyway, the current situation as of 1954. It is considered that as far as the current situation is concerned that there are few indications that these objects and their builders pose a direct threat to the security of the United States, despite the uncertainty as to their ultimate motives in coming here. Certainly, the technology possessed by these beings far surpasses anything known to modern science, yet their presence here seems to be benign, and they seem to be avoiding contact with our species, at least for the present. Several dead entities have been recovered along with a substantial amount of wreckage and devices from downed craft, all of which are now under study at various locations. No attempt has been made by extraterrestrial entities either to contact authorities or to recover their dead counterparts of the downed craft, even though one of the crashes was the result of direct military action. The greatest threat at this time arises from the acquisition and study of such advanced technology by foreign powers unfriendly to the United States. It is for this reason that the recovery and study of this type of material by the United States has been given such a high priority. And then it goes on to, in Chapter 2, the purpose for Chapter 2. It says, this operations manual is published for the information and guidance of all concerned. It contains information on determination, documentation, collection, and disposition of debris, devices, craft, and occupants of such craft as defined as extraterrestrial technology or extraterrestrial biological entities, EBEs, in Section 2 of this chapter. We're going to get into Section 2 of this Chapter 2. It talks about the extraterrestrial technology is defined as follows. A, aircraft identified as not manufactured in the United States or any terrestrial foreign powers, including experimental military or civilian aircraft. Aircraft in this category are generally known as unidentified flying objects or UFOBs. Such aircraft may appear as one of several shapes and configurations and exhibit extraordinary flight characteristics. B, objects and devices of unknown origin or function, manufactured by processes or of materials not consistent with current technology or scientific knowledge. C, wreckage of any aircraft thought to be of extraterrestrial manufacture or origin. Such wreckage may be the results of accidents or military action. D, materials that exhibit unusual or extraordinary characteristics not consistent with current technology or scientific knowledge. Extraterrestrial biological entities, EBEs, are described as A, creatures, humanoid or otherwise, whose evolutionary processes responsible for their development are demonstrably different from those postulated or observed in Homo sapiens. Then it talks about the description of the craft. Documented extraterrestrial craft, UFOBs, are classified in one of four categories based on general shape as follows. A, elliptical or disc shape. This type of craft is of a metallic construction and dull aluminum in color. They have the appearance of two pie pans or shallow dishes pressed together and may have a raised dome on the top or bottom. No seams or joints are visible on the surface, giving the impression of one-piece construction. Discs are estimated from 50 to 300 feet in diameter, and the thickness is approximately 15% of the diameter, not including the dome, which is 30% of the disc diameter and extends another 4 to 6 feet above the main body of the disc. The dome may or may not include windows or ports, and ports are present around the lower rim of the disc in some instances. Most disc-shaped craft are equipped with lights on the top and bottom, and also around the rim. These lights are not visible when the craft is at rest or not functioning. There are generally no visible antenna or projections. Landing gear consists of 3 extendable legs ending in circular landing pads. When fully extended, this landing gear supports the main body 2 to 3 feet above the surface at the lowest point. A rectangular hatch is located along the equator or on the surface or on the lower surface of the disc. B, fuselage or cigar shape. Documented reports of this type of craft are extremely rare. Air Force radar reports indicate they are approximately 2,000 feet long and 95 feet thick, and apparently they do not operate in the lower atmosphere. Very little information is available on the performance of these craft, but radar reports have indicated speeds in excess of 7,000 miles per hour. They do not appear to engage in the violent and erratic maneuvers associated with the smaller types. C, ovoid or circular shape. This type of craft is described as being shaped like an ice cream cone, being rounded at the large end and tapering to a near point at the other end. They are approximately 30 to 40 feet long, and the thick end diameter is approximately 20% of the length. There is an extremely bright light at the pointed end, and this craft usually travels point down. They can appear to be any shape from round to cylindrical, depending upon the angle of observation. Often, sightings of this type of craft are elliptical craft seen at an inclined angle or edge on. Just want to stop there for a second. Boy, that reminds you of that one Pentagon video, doesn't it? The gimbal. That's what that was. That was looked like an ice cream cone if you look at that. Okay, moving on. D, airfoil or triangular shape. This craft is believed to be new technology due to the rarity and recency of the observations. Radar indicated an isosceles triangle profile, the longest side being nearly 300 feet in length. Little is known about the performance of these craft due to the rarity of good sightings, but they are believed capable of high speeds and abrupt maneuvers similar to or exceeding the performance attributed to types A and C. Now, let's just talk about the triangle ones. There's all this talk these days about how we have secret triangle type aircraft, and that may well be true. Some of that, the TR-3Bs, it's a lot of UFO guys are all excited about that. I don't really care. If we came up with that, okay, that's great. We have some new equipment. I'm concerned about the triangles that are being operated by the extraterrestrials. And obviously, according to this document here, the triangle craft were being spotted back in 1954. Next is the description of extraterrestrial biological entities, or EBEs. Examination of remains recovered from wreckage of UFOBs indicate that extraterrestrial biological entities may be classified into two distinct categories as follows. A, EBE Type 1. These entities are humanoid and might be mistaken for human beings of the Oriental race if seen from a distance. They are bipedal, 5 feet 4 inches in height, and weigh 80 to 100 pounds. Proportionally, they are similar to humans, although the cranium is somewhat larger and more rounded. The skin is a pale, chalky yellow in color, thick, and slightly pebbled in appearance. The eyes are small, wide-set, almond-shaped, with brownish-black irises with very large pupils. The whites of the eyes are not like that of humans, but have a pale gray cast. The ears are small and not low on the skull. The nose is thin and long, and the mouth is wider than in humans, and nearly lipless. There is no apparent facial hair and very little body hair, that being very fine and confined to the underarm and the groin area. The body is thin and without apparent body fat, but the muscles are well developed. The hands are small with 4 long digits, but no opposable thumb. The outside digit is jointed in a manner as to be nearly opposable, and there is no webbing between the fingers as in humans. The legs are slightly but noticeably bowed, and the feet are somewhat splayed and proportionally large. B. Type 2. These entities are humanoid but differ from Type 1 in many respects. They are bipedal, 3 feet 5 inches, 4 feet to 2 inches in height, and weigh 25 to 50 pounds. Proportionally, the head is much larger than humans or Type 1 EBEs, the cranium being much larger and elongated. The eyes are very large, slanted, and nearly wrap around the side of the skull. They are black with no whites showing. There is no noticeable brow ridge, and the skull has a slight peak that runs over the crown. The nose consists of 2 small slits, which sit high above the slit-like mouth. There are no external ears. The skin is a pale bluish-gray color, being somewhat darker on the back of the creature, and is very smooth and fine-celled. There is no hair on either the face or the body, and these creatures do not appear to be mammalian. The arms are long in proportion to the legs, and the hands have 3 long tapering fingers and a thumb which is nearly as long as the fingers. The second finger is thicker than the others, but not as long as the index finger. The feet are small and narrow, and four toes are joined together with a membrane. It is not definitely known where either type of creature originated, but it seems certain that they did not evolve on Earth. It is further evident, although not certain, that they may have originated on two different planets. Okay, now we're going to move on to the description of extraterrestrial technology. The following information is from preliminary analysis reports of wreckage collected from crash sites of extraterrestrial craft from 1947 through 1953. Excerpts from which are quoted verbatim to provide guidance as to the type of characteristics of material that might be encountered in future recovery operations. A. Initial analysis of the debris from the crash site seems to indicate that the debris is that of an extraterrestrial craft which exploded from within and came into contact with the ground with great force, completely destroying the craft. The volume of matter indicates that the craft was approximately the size of a medium aircraft, although the weight of the debris indicates that the craft was extremely light for its size. B. Metallurgical analysis of the bulk of the debris recovered indicates that the samples are not composed of any materials currently known to terrestrial science. C. The material tested possesses great strength and resistance to heat in proportion to its weight and size, being stronger by far than any materials used in military or civilian aircraft at present. D. Much of the material, having the appearance of aluminum foil or aluminum magnesium sheeting, displays none of the characteristics of either metal, resembling instead some kind of unknown plastic-like material. E. Solid structures and substantial beams having a distinct similarity in appearance to very dense, grain-free wood, was very light in weight and possesses tensile and compression strength not obtainable by any means known to modern industry. F. None of the material tested displayed measurable magnetic characteristics or residual radiation. G. Several samples were engraved or embossed with marks and patterns. These patterns were not readily identifiable, and attempts to decipher their meaning has been largely unsuccessful. H. Examination of several apparent mechanical devices, gears, etc., revealed little or nothing of their functions or methods of manufacture. Then in Chapter 3, it goes on to talk about recovery operations. And the first thing they talk about is press blackout. This is all part of the security efforts. Okay, press blackout. Great care must be taken to preserve the security of any location where extraterrestrial technology might be retrievable for scientific study. Extreme measures must be taken to protect and preserve any material or craft from discovery, examination, or removal by civilian agencies or individuals of the general public. It is therefore recommended that a total press blackout be initiated whenever possible. If this course of action should not prove feasible, the following cover stories are suggested for release to the press. The officer in charge will act quickly to select the cover story that best fits the situation. It should be remembered when selecting a cover story that official policy regarding UFOBs is that they do not exist. A. Official denial. The most desirable response would be that nothing unusual has occurred. By stating that the government has no knowledge of the event, further investigation by the public press may be forestalled. B. Discredit witnesses. If at all possible, witnesses will be held incommunicado until the extent of their knowledge and involvement can be determined. Witnesses will be discouraged from talking about what they have seen, and intimidation may be necessary to ensure their cooperation. If witnesses have already contacted the press, it will be necessary to discredit their stories. This can be done by the assertion that they have either misinterpreted natural events, are the victims of hysteria or hallucinations, or are the perpetrators of hoaxes. C. Deceptive statements. It may become necessary to issue false statements to preserve the security of the site. Meteors, downed satellites, weather balloons, and military aircraft are all acceptable alternatives, although in the case of the downed military aircraft statement, care should be exercised not to suggest that the aircraft might be experimental or secret, as this might arouse more curiosity of both the American and the foreign press. Statement issues concerning contamination of the area due to toxic spills from trucks or railroad tankers can also serve to keep unauthorized or undesirable persons away from the area. And then the next section here is secure the area. The area must be secured as rapidly as possible to keep unauthorized personnel from infiltrating the site. The officer in charge will set up a perimeter and establish a command post inside the perimeter. Personnel allowed on the site will be kept to the absolute minimum necessary to prepare the craft or debris for transport and will consist of military security teams. Local authorities may be pressed into service as traffic and crowd control. Under no circumstances will local official or law enforcement personnel be allowed inside the perimeter, and all necessary precautions should be taken to ensure that they do not interfere with the operation. A. Perimeter. It is desirable that sufficient military personnel be utilized to set up a perimeter around the site large enough to keep both unauthorized personnel and the perimeter personnel from seeing the site. Once the site is contained, regular patrols will be set up along the perimeter to ensure complete security, and electronic surveillance will be utilized to augment the patrols. Perimeter personnel will be equipped with hand communication and automatic weapons with live ammunition. Personnel working at the site will carry sidearms. No unauthorized personnel will be allowed into the secured area. B. Command post. Ideally, the command post should be as close to the site as is practical to efficiently coordinate operations. As soon as the command post is operational, contact with the Majestic-12 group will be established via secure communications. C. Area sweep. The site and the surrounding area will be cleared of all unauthorized personnel. Witnesses will be debriefed and detained for further evaluation by MJ-12. Under no circumstances will witnesses be released from custody until their stories have been evaluated by MJ-12 and they have been thoroughly debriefed. D. Situation evaluation. A preliminary evaluation of the situation will be completed and a preliminary report prepared. The MJ-12 group will then be briefed on the situation at the earliest possible opportunity. The MJ-12 group will then make a determination as to whether or not a MJ-12 red team or OPNAC team will be dispatched to the area. Okay, then the next section gets into technology recovery, and it talks about, I'm not going to read all of this, but it talks about how they get rid of the they're using flatbed trailers to get rid of some of the craft, and it has to be camouflaged. They need to contain the extraterrestrial biological entities. But then later on, we're going to go through this. Well, before that, I want to read this cleansing. One of the other things under the security chapter is cleansing the area. Once all material has been removed from the central area, the surrounding area will be thoroughly inspected to make sure that all traces of extraterrestrial technology have been removed. In the case of a crash, the surrounding area will be thoroughly gone over several times to ensure that nothing has been overlooked. The search area involved may vary depending on local conditions, at the discretion of the officer in charge. When the officer in charge is satisfied that no further evidence of the event remains at the site, it may be evacuated. Okay, then we're going to go on. We're going to push forward here. There's a chapter here about receiving and handling. But then another pretty interesting chapter here is on extraterrestrial biological entities. That's in chapter 5. And it goes on here. It says the scope of this. This section deals with encounters with EBEs. Such encounters fall under the jurisdiction of MJ-12 OPNAC BBS-01, whatever that means, and will be dealt with by this special unit only. This section details the responsibilities of persons or units making the initial contact. Any encounter with entities known to be of extraterrestrial origin is to be considered to be a matter of national security and therefore classified top secret. Under no circumstances the general public or the public press to learn of the existence of these entities. The official government policy is that such creatures do not exist and that no agency of the federal government is now engaged in any study of extraterrestrials or their artifacts. Any deviation from this stated policy is absolutely forbidden. And then it talks about encounters with EBEs, and it may be classified to one of the following categories. A, encounters initiated by EBEs. Possible contact may take place as a result of overtures by the entities themselves. In these instances, it is anticipated that encounters will take place at military installations or other obscure locations selected by mutual agreement. Such meeting would have the advantage of being limited to personnel with appropriate clearance away from public scrutiny. Although it is not considered very probable, there also exists the possibility that EBEs may land in public places without prior notice. In this case, the OPNAC team will formulate cover stories for the press and prepare briefings for the president and the chiefs of staff. B, encounters as the result of downed craft. Contact with survivors of accidents or craft downed by natural events or military action may occur with little or no warning. In these cases, it is important that the initial contact be limited to military personnel to preserve security. Civilian witnesses to the area will be detained and debriefed by MJ-12. Contact with EBEs by military personnel not having MJ-12 or OPNAC clearance is to be strictly limited to action necessary to ensure the availability of the EBEs for study by the OPNAC team. Isolation, and then the next part here, isolation and custody. EBEs will be detained by whatever means are necessary and this is living organisms. We're talking about this is what they do if they capture living organisms. EBEs will be detained by whatever means are necessary and removed to a secure location as soon as possible. Precautions will be taken by personnel coming in contact with EBEs to minimize the risk of disease as a result of contamination by unknown organisms. If the entities are wearing spacesuits or breathing apparatus of some kind, care should be exercised to prevent damage to these devices. While all efforts should be taken to assure the well-being of the EBEs, they must be isolated from any contact with unauthorized personnel. While it is not clear what provisions or amenities might be required by non-human entities, they should be provided if possible. The officer in charge of the operation will make these determinations, since no guidelines now exist to cover this area. B, injured or wounded entities will be treated by medical personnel assigned to the OPNAC team. If the team medical personnel are not immediately available, first aid will be administered by medical corps personnel at the initial site. Since little is known about EBE biological functions, aid will be confined to the stopping of bleeding, bandaging of wounds, and splinting of broken limbs. No medications of any kind are to be administered, as the effect of terrestrial medications on non-human biological systems are impossible to predict. As soon as the injuries are considered stabilized, the EBEs will be moved by closed ambulance or other suitable conveyance to a secure location. C, in dealing with any living extraterrestrial biological entity, security is of paramount importance. All other considerations are secondary. Although it is preferable to maintain the physical well-being of any entity, the loss of EBE life is considered acceptable if conditions or delays to preserve that life in any way compromises the security of the operations. That's pretty interesting. We're just going to stop here for a second. That's pretty interesting, isn't it? So basically, if for whatever reason it looks like somebody in the public might see one of these things, they'll let them die or maybe even kill them. All right, moving on. D, once the OPNAC team has taken custody of the EBEs, their care and transportation to designated facilities become the responsibility of OPNAC personnel. Every cooperation will be extended to the team in carrying out duties. OPNAC team personnel will be given top priority at all times, regardless of their apparent rank or status. No person has the authority to interfere with the OPNAC team in the performance of his duties by special direction of the President of the United States. So basically this OPNAC group, which is an organization of MJ12 that they have top. They're in charge when these things happen, when these things crash, when there's aliens running around. These guys, they're in charge. As of 1954, maybe the names of these things have changed over time, as we know they've changed in other. Where they changed UFOBs to UFOs, and then now they use UAP. So who knows what these things are called? Do they even call it Majestic-12 anymore? Who knows? They might have had to change that name too. And then Section 2 talks about non-living organisms. It says, scope, ideally, retrieval for scientific study of cadavers and other biological remains will be carried out by medical personnel familiar with this type of procedure. Because of security considerations, such collection may need to be done by non-medical personnel. This section will provide guidance for retrieval, preservation, and removal of cadavers and remains in the field. Retrieval and preservation. A. The degree of decomposition of organic remains will vary depending on the length of time the remains have been lying in the open unprotected and may be accelerated by both local weather conditions and action by predators. Therefore, biological specimens will be removed from the crash site as quickly as possible to preserve the remains in as good a condition as possible. A photographic record will be made of all remains before they are removed from the site. B. Personnel involved in this type of operation will take all reasonable precautions to minimize physical contact with the cadavers or remains being retrieved. Surgical gloves should be worn, or, if they are not available, wool or leather gloves may be worn, provided they are collected for decontamination immediately after use. Shovels and entrenching tools may be employed to handle remains, provided caution is exercised to be certain no damage is done to the remains. Remains will be touched with bare hands only if no other means of moving them can be found. All personnel and equipment involved in recovery operations will undergo decontamination procedures immediately after those operations have been completed. C. Remains will be preserved against further decomposition as equipment and conditions permit. Cadavers and remains will be bagged or securely wrapped in waterproof coverings. Tarpaulins or foul weather gear may be used for this purpose if necessary. Remains will be refrigerated or packed with ice if available. All remains will be tagged or labeled and the time and date recorded. Wrapped remains will be placed on stretchers or in sealed containers for immediate removal to a secure facility. D. Small detached pieces and materials scraped from solid surfaces will be put in jars or other small capped containers if available. Containers will be clearly marked as to their contents and the time and date recorded. Containers will be refrigerated or packed with ice as soon as possible and removed to a secure location. Okay, now this is very interesting stuff. Again, I highly recommend you either pick up Stanton Friedman's book, Top Secret Magic, or you check out the link I've provided to the Woods website on the Special Operations Manual, where they pretty much, they actually have slides on there, a slideshow that they use for presentations, and you could go through that. They have a section in that site where they give all the reasons why they believe this document is real. This operations manual is real. It makes you wonder, like, who sent this to Berliner back in '94? Is it somebody? I mean, is it the Majestic? You wonder, is the group, like, say, Majestic-12 itself? Did they decide, okay, we need to get this out to the public, but we just can't come out with this information? But being that there's an interest in it, we need to let people know somehow, but we'll still deny it, but we'll release this information anyway, just so they know what's going on behind the scenes. A smart guy might say, okay, maybe it's a good idea that they're keeping it secret. They're giving us something here. They're not admitting to it, but they're leaking documents here. So people out there with brains in their heads that understand that there is a presence here know that there are things going on behind the scenes, and it is understandable in a way, though. I mean, you can understand why there's been secrecy for all this long. I mean, I don't think it should be, right? I think the whole human race should know about this, but at the same time, you understand the reasoning behind it. I mean, basically, a lot of people would be scared about this. I mean, that's for one thing, but I guess more importantly, the military implications of it. I mean, if these things are crashing all over the planet, you know, you have to worry about your enemies figuring out how these things work before you do. So is there a secret race going on behind the scenes? But this special operations manual is very interesting. Now, you wonder, now this was from 1954. How many times over the decades, you know, has it been updated? I mean, it must have been updated multiple times. You know, you wonder, okay, they talk about two different types of extraterrestrials that they knew of as of 1954. How many more do they know of at this point? You know, I mean, could you imagine somebody giving going to Congress and giving a briefing on this stuff now? I mean, the whole world's collective jaw would hit the floor. Because again, like I talked about recently, as a whole, we're pretending this isn't real. But here, I mean, this document itself, I mean, there's so much to it. I mean, there's a lot more than what I just went over here. You have to check it out. There's a lot more details to this thing, and when you read about it, and you read, I think particularly that website, the Woods website, where they talk about you know, how they authenticated it. I mean, you see, it's like, yeah, this thing is real. You know, again, was it Majestic-12 group itself that leaked it, or is there every now and then back, you know, is there somebody like in the government that somehow got access to these documents and said, you know what, I'm going to take pictures of these pages and I'm going to send them to somebody someday. You know, when were these pictures taken? I mean, you look at the documents that were sent, the images on the film that Berliner received. It's like somebody's holding this binder with these pages in it, and they're taking a picture. You could see a thumb and finger, you know, in a couple of these pictures. Like, I mean, did they do this? I mean, was this person somehow caught later on? I mean, that's another thing. I mean, you wonder, like, how did they get away with this? I mean, maybe back then, maybe when were they taken? Were the pictures taken in the 50s and somebody was sitting on that film for decades? Or was the film taken, you know, not long before they were sent out to Berliner? Like, you know, who took these pictures, you know, and who sent them out? Was it one and the same? Or again, was it the MJ-12 as a group sending, you know, we got to get something out there. We're just still not going to admit it, as you know, but at the same time we'll get some information out there, and you know, some people in the public will say, well, they'll put two and two together and realize, well, yeah, they have to be, you know, it's real. The ones who know it's real, like I do, like I know it's real, so I know there has to be something more than a tip. You know, there's been some other organization within the government working with some people in private industry studying this stuff since 1947. There's no doubt in my mind about that. ATIP, Project Blue Book, all that stuff is just nonsense. You know, that's just surface. That's just, you know, that's nothing. There's a group, whether it's still called Majestic-12 now or something else. There's something out there. There's a group that has to be. There's no question. And they would have to have an operations manual. And when you look at this thing, you realize, yeah, this all makes sense. This is what it would be if there was an operations manual that was prepared for how to handle these crash saucers and alien remains and live aliens. Well, this is what it would look like. I mean, what else would it look like? But this thing was really, I mean, it feels like a government document to me. This doesn't look like it's something that could have been faked, you know. And the other thing is if it was just a single person or maybe a small, you know, 2 or 3 people that decided to leak this, you know, I mean, like, you know, maybe there's people, you have to imagine there's people even in the government right now who know the whole truth and want to get and believe the right course of action is to, you know, alert the public to this truth. And you would imagine, okay, say back in 94, somebody was like, you know what, screw this, I'm going to send this out. The public needs to know about this. But if I get caught, I'm going to go to prison for the rest of my life, or who knows what they'll do to me. So somehow somebody figured a way to sneak this out, and maybe they got away with it. You know, you would think that they did. I mean, unless the person was, you know, handled secretly, you know, behind the scenes and nobody knows. You know, did they figure out who it was? I guess we'll probably never know. But yeah, it's incredibly interesting. Again, I mean, it's a shame that the book by Ryan Wood is no longer available unless you want to pay like almost $300 for it on Amazon. It's out of print, and they also had available on their website. You'll see they also had a reconstruction of the actual manual itself. And there's a lot of other interesting things. I'm not going to get into it here on this podcast. I think, these are things people need to learn on teach themselves, right? Read about it yourself. Go to that website, read all the stuff, all the information they have on there. It's highly interesting. Read Stanton Friedman's book, Top Secret Magic. I mean, he talks about that. He talks about the whole Majestic-12, all the Majestic-12 documents, including the Special Operations Manual. But yeah, we need to get this. It's time. We're moving toward that. But I mean, this is fascinating. This is fascinating. I mean, it must be what kind of life. I mean, imagine being a member of these special top secret groups that go out and retrieve crashed flying saucers and recover alien bodies and possibly, take live extraterrestrials into custody and bring them somewhere. And, where do they, in this manual, I mean, if you look through it, there's actually some of the places that they talk about where there's a page where there's different places where they would bring certain things. Like it tells you where to bring, like, for instance, an aircraft at this time in 1954, the receiving facility for any kind of extraterrestrial aircraft would be Area 51 S4. And that was in 1954. One of the interesting things was that nobody knew about Area 51, for the most part back in 1954 at all. But, the Woods had done some research, and it was discovered that Area 51 actually construction started sometime in 1951. So by 1954, it would have been there. So by 1954, they're saying that aircraft gets sent to Area 51, an intact device gets sent to Area 51, damaged device gets sent to Area 51. Supplies and provisions, these are non-mechanical or non-electronic materials of a support nature, such as clothing, personal belongings, organic ingestibles, etc. They got sent to some place, Blue Lab WP61, whatever that is, I don't know. And then living non-human organisms in apparent good or reasonable health, they were sent to some place called OPNAC BBS 01-01. Where's that at? I mean, I don't know. That's something different than Area 51. And then any kind of media, any kind of printed matter, electronic recordings, maps, charts, photographs, and films. They got all that stuff, I guess with regard to any kind of documents that were prepared for each crash. They were sent to Building 21 KB 88. Again, you got to check this stuff out. You got to read these books. You got to... too many people just don't understand the scope and breadth of this whole situation, because a lot of people, other than people that have been studying this for years, a lot of people have been asleep until basically 2017, where it seemed like the Pentagon started coming clean a little bit, and the press was a little bit more open to it, the mainstream press, because the mainstream press has pretty much been an enemy to the truth with regard to the reality that extraterrestrials are present on this earth, and that there's a secret government organization that knows all about it, and they've been keeping it, and their basically job is to keep it a secret and to study these things in secret. And it's all of it's starting to come out. But again, it would be interesting if somebody were to bring up the Special Operations Manual at one of these congressional committee hearings. Why not bring that up? I mean, instead, but the problem is, I guess even if they did bring it up, the people the Pentagon's sending up there to answer questions don't have those answers. You would have to try to figure out who does have the answers, And again, it'd probably be okay for them to lie about it. Even if you did get somebody up there to sit down and talk to the Congress, to a congressional, in a congressional hearing, they'd probably be authorized to lie. This is like it says in this, at this point in 1954, this whole thing was 2 points above top secret. I mean, is it still 2 points above top secret? Maybe it's 5 points above top secret. Maybe it's 10 points above top secret. Who knows where it's at, where it stands these days. But the whole, one of these days something's going to happen where it's going to become it's going to be irrefutable. There'll be no amount of trying to cover it up, no amount of press blackouts, no amount of lying that's going to be able to cover it up. That's why it would be best, for our officials, the ones who are in charge of this, to come clean already.